Hello, everybody. It's Susan, and I'm back to talk about all of the things in the week ahead, and actually the 2 weeks ahead, because we're in an incredibly busy time. I don't use words like karmic or fated very often. Of course, all life is karma, but at the same time, there's certain things that come up in a way that make you think there's something happening that is extraordinary in this moment in time. And we are living in extraordinary times, as probably everyone throughout history has thought. But there's a big shift that's happening. And these next couple of weeks are really illustrative of the bigger shift that's coming for the months and years ahead. So I think it's a great time to, if you haven't already started journal, take note of what's going on. At the very least, notice things that you might not otherwise give any kind of weight to, things like encounters with people or things that shift your perspective, and take them seriously because there's something that's changing right now in the lead up to the eclipses, which is going to carry us through the next few months and even into 2026. We're on the precipice of something really big. We're all in it. It's not just individual lives that are changing, but we're changing collectively. And this is going to be a frame of reference that's changing in our society and in our global experience. We've already seen that in the last couple of weeks, where there's been an energetic handoff, a political, energetic, economic handoff between the West and the rest of the world. And if you're not really paying attention, you may not have noticed that. Or if you're only paying attention to a particular bias in media, you won't have noticed that. But certainly there's a symbolic shift that's happening, which is going to diminish rapidly the influence of Europe and the influence of the United States vis-a-vis the rest of the world. And we're in the process of that right now. So pay attention to what happens in the next week or two, especially leading up to that lunar eclipse, which I'll talk about in another video on the 7th of September. That's a Pisces eclipse, and it will be the first of the Pisces eclipses that is ruled by a very dignified Jupiter. And equally as Saturn on the 1st of September is, and I'll show this chart in a moment, Saturn on the 1st of September moves back into Pisces. It's also going to be ruled by this Jupiter. And the particularity of this Jupiter is that it's exalted in the sign of Cancer. But that also means that we need to pay close attention to what the moon is doing throughout that cycle. And the moon is moving very quickly. Moon changes signs every 2 days. So it goes roughly 13.2, 13 degrees and 20 arc minutes of a degree per day through a sign. So things are changing rapidly. There's going to be a fast pace of change as if it hasn't already been. And one of the things that we can reflect on, especially as Uranus is just now into Gemini and being triggered by that moon, and I'll show you in a moment what I mean, is to really inquire about our relationship with linear time versus timelessness. And this is, I think, the bigger message of Saturn moving back into Pisces for one last gasp of about 4.5 months, where we really will require some kind of awareness of what our spiritual structure is, what holds us to something solid or something that feels more reliable. Certainly, it won't be something in the outside world that needs to come from an inner strength. And these aspects are showing us in some way over the next couple of weeks what needs to shift and how things are shifting and how that might affect us. So before I continue, I always forget to do this. My name is Susan, and I am a Western tropical astrologer. I'm so happy that you're here. I really do love your comments, and I'm really grateful for the appreciation that you show me. I'm very also open to your astrological criticism. As I've said in a previous video, just don't make it personal. You just don't get to tell me how to show up on my channel. Um, and also, what I'd love to say is that what I find most intriguing about astrology is how it can help us in our individual lives try to find a certain resilience. So rather than asking, why is this happening to me? And setting yourself up as a victim of astrology or a sort of, just being bashed around by the cosmos, as it were, or by life itself. then start to consider asking yourself, what am I learning? And this is a really important question as we've got this really strong, dignified Jupiter in exaltation in Cancer that is ruling not only the North Node in this moment and coming up to a trine to that North Node, but also soon to be ruling Saturn again. And then again in October, it'll be ruling Neptune again. So we do have an opportunity here to wake up in an individual uh, sense of taking responsibility for how we are experiencing life. Life is always coming through the inner experience. Things don't happen from the outside. And of course, that doesn't mean that bad things or bad people don't do bad things to people. That's an experience that some people have. Well, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how you handle what comes through your life. And this is where this week or next week, leading up into the whole cycle of the eclipses in September, can really, it's really beneficial to look at that notion of where victimization and martyring in that Pisces Virgo way can actually be so disempowering that you become more anxious, more distraught, and more malleable, more easily provoked, more easily controlled. And this is something to be cautious of in the cycle that we're entering into collectively for many decades to come. So let's break down this chart. If you're not already looking at your screen, I invite you to look at this chart and just, even from a purely graphic point of view, notice how busy this is. I've even stripped away the everything that is not the main planets and the outer planets. So I've taken away Chiron and Aries and Black Moon Lilith just to simplify the chart because it starts to get too bogged down. And this is a complicated moment in time. So you can get that image, the visual image of this massive influx of energy that is going to affect all of us, as I mentioned. So let's break it down bit by bit. I'm starting this on the just on the day of the new moon in Virgo, which is at 0 degrees of Virgo. I did a separate video about that, so you might want to hear that. If you can go back and find that on my channel. It's an extraordinary moon in and of itself. That was the point of a yod, or the two inconjuncts or quincunxes coming from Saturn and Neptune, and also by sextile to Pluto. So there was a Saturn Neptune sextile to Pluto, and then the two inconjuncts that were pointing at the new moon. And we still have remnants of this while the sun is still there, even though the moon has moved on. But what's really interesting about this particular moment that we're looking at, which is the 25th of August, that's Monday, so 2 days after the new moon, is that we now have Venus ingressing Leo. And in and of itself, that's not very interesting. Venus moves around roughly in a normal cycle every 9 months. She comes back, so a gestation cycle. She comes back to another sign. So, for example, the next time she'll be in Leo will be June next year. And this is a really interesting dynamic to follow. The Venus cycle is a bigger cycle of 8 years, but we can break it down into the 18-month segments. And that also extends the cycle of Venus because when she's retrograding, then the cycle will be longer. So we have this Venus now in Leo after this year, where she's been retrograde. In 2026, Venus does not retrograde, and she skips a year every year. So we're looking at something here that's already inviting something that's fresh and new, even just from the perspective of Venus going into Leo, now immediately creating an opposition to Pluto. And that's significant in and of itself because there's something here with Venus in Leo that says, I have my preferences, my desires, and my individual wants and needs, and my way of self-expressing, my way of showing up in relationship, in finances, in the dynamic of being seen as well, which is very Leo. I would like to be noticed. I would like to be seen just as I am. We already have Mercury there, and that has been already for the last couple of weeks. So that's not a new energy. And Mercury itself is not really part of this aspect cycle. It's not really doing very much at this point. It will come up to an inconjunct, or rather a semi-sextile with the south node that it rules. So Mercury and Leo will move into the 18th degree and then semi-sextile the south node. But that is a fleeting transit, and it's not really the bigger story of this moment. The bigger story is the fact that not only is Venus in opposition to Pluto, where the preferences, the individual preferences, which we've been thinking about because of this Mercury cycle of retrograde that has happened. So over the month of July and all through August, Mercury has been asking us these Leo questions of what do I need? What do I want? How do I want to manifest it? Who am I in terms of my way of being, my way of expressing myself? And that will differ according to where Leo is in your chart. But this Venus immediately starts to contrast or oppose the energy of Pluto in retrograde in Aquarius. And the Pluto in Aquarius has been there already now 2.5 years, believe it or not, almost 2.5 years. And that dynamic of Pluto in Aquarius has really shown us where society is breaking up, changing, falling apart in some areas to be reconstructed in that Plutonian way of let's do this differently. Let's make this happen in a different way. And the Pluto, of course, in Aquarius is also affiliated with the notion of the control over speech, over freedom of movement, freedom of thought. We're in this phase. We have to acknowledge it. We're in some pretty dark times. That's why we need to be resilient internally. We need to be resilient so that we don't get bogged down by that, but we can allow ourselves to continue to grow, to expand our notion of what it means to be human and our connection with spirit and our connection to what is greater than this brief life that we have here on Earth. Now, Venus is not standing still in opposition to Pluto. It's going to hold for about 3 days, so between basically the 25th of August all the way through about the 28th. So most of the week, Venus is in opposition to Pluto, but she's also creating immediately a trine with Saturn, almost perfected on the same day that she ingresses Leo, but very, very strong nonetheless, and trining Neptune very soon after that. This also means that Venus is in a sextile with the moon that she's ruling, and also sextiling Uranus within a day of that ingress. So the sextile, opposition, and trine that we've just seen here are all immediately in effect, and then they hold in some cases for a couple of days. So all of this tension in terms of what we need to stand for, what we need to feel, how we need to balance things out, how we need to be creative, innovative, insightful, it's all being very strongly triggered at this moment. As soon as the moon moved into Libra just earlier, the day that Venus ingresses Leo, we now see another kite. Remember, there was a kite at the time of the new moon in Virgo, and the tip of the kite was on the new moon, in fact, in Virgo, which is extraordinary in and of itself. But here we now have a new kite. There was a kite and a yacht. This was the most extraordinary energy of the last couple of weeks. And now we have this grand air trine between this moon and Pluto and Uranus that is also accompanied by a mini grand trine, which is this mini grand trine that we're seeing through 2025 and into 2026. And that is the Pluto trining Uranus, which is sextiling, both of which are sextiling Saturn and Neptune. So we're being triggered at this moment by a very important moon because, again, that moon is ruling Jupiter, and Jupiter is in exaltation. It's the planet that is in its best dignity at this moment. And again, that suggests that there's something that requires our higher vision, a wisdom, an awareness of what we need, of what is nourishing, of what is important for us, of what is foundational to our faith, to our capacity to discern and assess what is wise and what is good. And that's very much all to do with that Jupiter quality, which is, remember, ruling that North Node all the time, that the North Node remains in Pisces until July 2026. So let's come through the week now, and we're just going to get to, I'm going to just take you to the Saturn regress. So just a week later, we now have, again, a new chart, a different chart. So as we go, oh, and maybe before we do that, let me just come back. Let me see. I'm going to have to do this. Wait just a minute. I'm going to have to do this in terms of the chart that we just saw. So I'm going to have to give me just a moment to find that date again. There we go. So here we have the Venus. We'll push her back into Leo. And I wanted to point out as well, not only do we have this pattern of the kite, and we have this pattern of the yod, remember two quincunxes or inconjuncts plus a sextile. But we also have this very brief, because of the moon, very brief mystic rectangle. And this is why I say this week is really extraordinary. There's something that makes it special, particularly on Monday, but think of it as an enlightenment or an opportunity for us to see things in a new way, because we're all of the very early degrees of many signs are triggered, and that's really inciting something new and fresh and different. Of course, we've got Saturn, Neptune at the early degrees of Aries in a place they've already been. That was where they were from the point of view of Neptune in April, May, and June, but from the point of view of Saturn from June and July. So we're going back to something that we've already experienced, but we're still in the early phases of something. And that's in and of itself really substantial. It's something that's important. As we go forward in this time, I'm just going to maybe move it forward day by day. As we go forward in this time, notice that the moon also, as we get to the point where Saturn is going to move back into Pisces, I'll show you that chart in a moment, is again in this mutual generosity with Jupiter, which is ruling the moon, and the moon is ruling Jupiter. I find that in and of itself very significant because of the Jupiter rulership of Saturn as it's re-entering Pisces for the first time since the 25th of May, 2025. So we're now going back to this place where the question really is, what is the spiritual foundation of my life? This is very Jupiterian. Where do I feel like I want to have a bigger vision? That's very Sagittarian. Um, where do I need to have a structure that allows me to live as a spirit in this human form, that allows me to get through this undoubtedly difficult time. There's no point in pretending that this is not a difficult time, and it will become very, very difficult in ways that many people have not been prepared for, because we've been very comfortable in the West over the last 30, 40, 50 years. And many people assume that that's just the way life is, and it's going to be like that for a long time. And watching images of people somewhere far away in great discomfort feels very unrelated to our day-to-day experience. And yet we are also vulnerable to having an uncomfortable experience. And one of the things that we need to overcome and really rely on is spirit. And if we just take as an example the Palestinians who are going through a genocide at this moment for the last couple of years, but actually many, many decades already, in a slow motion uh, genocide, we're seeing them rely on their faith, and their profound faith is the one thing that they have, and that is allowing them to find courage in extremely discouraging circumstances, having been literally abandoned by the rest of the world. So, what would be your pillar? What would be your faith if something very drastic happened? We It's not to create fear, not at all. It's to create a resiliency. And this is, I think, what the message of these times are. We have Jupiter in a square to Mars that's coming up at the time that Saturn is moving into Pisces. Let me take that actual chart as we saw before. So the chart has moved around simply because the ascendant is different at the time that Saturn is regressing back on universal time, 1st of September, just after 9 a.m. universal time. And again, for those who ask the question, look at the screen and you notice this word tropical. That means I'm using the tropical zodiac. I'm using a whole sign system in a tropical zodiac. There's no such thing, by the way, as a Vedic zodiac. It's a sidereal zodiac based on the stars. And you also have the constellation zodiac. There's 3 zodiacs that we work with. And the tropical one is relating to the movement of our sun, our star, across the equator. And that creates the seasons and the shifts in the amount of daylight that we get. And that's the original foundation for the movement of the zodiac. So we continue to use that, and it's effective. And so is sidereal calculations as well, which are, by the way, founded on tropical. So let's have a look again at this chart from this new perspective, because the timing has shifted and because we're now on the 1st of September, just after 9 a.m., and Saturn is now back in Pisces, where we last saw it on the 25th of May. And this dynamic of Saturn back in Pisces is really an opportunity for us to go back over everything that we still haven't quite completed from March 2023. So when Saturn on the 7th of March 2023 moved into Pisces, there was something that shifted for us, and we're still moving through this dynamic. It's not complete yet until February, when Saturn finally leaves Pisces, and at that point we'll rejoin Neptune in Aries. So that would be on the 14th of February, but Neptune itself will already be back in Aries. I'll do a separate video about the Neptune retrograde, which starts in October. Neptune will already have been moving back into Aries on the 26th of January, 2026, and Saturn will be in Pisces until 14th of February, 2026. And then after that, about a week later, the two of them conjoin, perfect their conjunction for the first time, even though they've been within a very tight orb of conjunction all through 2025, or at least the second half of 2025. So this energy shift is going back to something familiar. It's something we've already moved into, but with better tools, we could say, because what's happening now is that Saturn, for the first time in our lifetime, so nobody alive listening to this will have experienced Saturn going through Pisces at the same time that Jupiter was in Cancer. And this is significant because we're looking at something even more powerful, as the North Node itself is still in Pisces. And the fact that we're getting really supportive dynamics, such as the Jupiter trine to the North Node at the same time, and the dynamic of willful change, or a desire for something different, a desire to take action based on this square between the Jupiter Mars. There is something here that we are able to do in a way that we were never able to do before in our lifetimes. Again, this dynamic is unique in our moment in time. All astrology is always a unique moment in time, but this is particularly subtle change that is going to be over the course of the next few months and into the new year, then perceived as something completely different, where a lot of the shenanigans that we're going to be going through in the next few months are about trying to reorganize things, or even release and let go of things that we thought we still needed to hang on to, or that we thought we couldn't live without, or that we thought we believed even. And this is part of the signification of Saturn moving back into Pisces. One of the ways of interpreting that is a loss of faith, or a need to review what we have faith in. What do we believe? And as Saturn is retrograding back there, and then eventually when Neptune joins it in October, there's going to be something that becomes evident. What did we have faith in that we realize we shouldn't put our faith in? Now, think in terms of the bigger picture. Saturn is always, it's there for the long game. It's representing authority figures, it's representing structures, it's representing the notion of something that we can see and taste and touch. It's tangible, it's the three-dimensional aspects. And very paradoxically, in Pisces, it's trying to structure something that can't be seen or felt. It's just there. We know it's there. We have to rely on it. We have to have faith on it because we sense it's there, but there's no necessarily tangible evidence of it. And so we're restructuring the invisible with the Saturn going back into Pisces. The fact that Uranus is also going to be stationing retrograde just days after, so on the 6th of September, we've got Uranus stationing retrograde and preparing to go back into Taurus, which it will do on the 7th of November, is also a significant part of this period of time of the, let's say, the period between the new moon in Virgo and the full moon in Pisces, which is creating this dynamic of this new eclipse cycle that we're experiencing just in the first week of September. Now, this is basically the moon as it's moving into Sagittarius is in it. It's in the first quarter or the opening quarter square. So that's when you start to see the moon looking like a half moon in the sky. And this is very, very significant that at that quarter, the quarter moon, the first opening square of the lunar cycle that begins the eclipse cycle, that was in and of itself a very unusual lunation, the first of two new moons in Virgo. It's very significant to me that Jupiter rules that moon, and it's, of course, ruling Pisces as well. So the moon in that mutual generosity, ruling Jupiter, there's something here that again tells us that we need to be more faith-based. We need to have a stronger sense of resiliency based on a bigger vision for why we're here. This is my way of seeing that. I think this is something that is going to be necessary, let's say, over the next few years, but most especially between now and 2026, when we're going through a very big shift in dynamics that will require a review of who we think we are. And I mean that on the sense of the spiritual level, with reference to humanity, but also on the individual level, the ego level. The notion of Jupiter in Cancer also can call in nationalism, tribalism in ways that is not necessarily constructive. And especially because the Mars squaring Jupiter is not in strong dignity, ruled by a Venus that is quite personally focused, let's say, focused on what she wants, what she needs, what she would like to manifest, how she would like to display her preferences, her desires. This can be a bit difficult to find this harmony with others, to find something just and fair. And so we have to ask the bigger question, who am I really? And is this passport or this flag a part of who I am? I have been taught to believe that, but is that true? And in fact, is that even harmful that I even hold that belief? So these are things that we can really explore over the next couple of weeks, recognizing that Venus is playing a very strong role here at this time because she's also the exaltation ruler of Pisces. So it's not just that she is ruling Mars at this time, which is still the ruler of Neptune and was the ruler of Saturn while it was in Aries, but also the fact that she has a very special affinity with Pisces. So there's something that Venus is adding to this equation that Jupiter and the moon have already helped us understand. Our personal preferences are worthy of reconsideration, and that's what had happened when Venus was in opposition to Pluto, is what I want and desire in harmony or able to be rectified or resolved or harmonized in some way with the needs of this changing collective, this changing social fabric. So I think for the moment, that's all I need to say about this build-up. Let's go then to Saturn, where Saturn itself is going to be moving from the very last degree of Pisces to about the 25th degree of Pisces, where it stations direct. And it will station direct on the 28th of November. And so whilst it's in that direct station, I'll do a separate video about that because it's a lot of information to keep adding on. But that station will affect anybody who has planets or very sensitive points like the midheaven or the ascendant in let's say the last 6 degrees or so of Pisces. You might extend it to 7 degrees, so it could be from, say, 23 Pisces till the end of the sign. You most especially true if you have something around 24, 25, 26 degrees of Pisces. And that, of course, would be by conjunction. Saturn would be conjoining those placements. And by opposition, if you have those same degrees in Virgo, and of course by square, if you have those same degrees in Gemini or Sagittarius, the other mutable signs, you will be noticing this very, very specifically in your experience. And that would be particularly so in the second half of November and the first half of December, something very significant. But really, we're looking at this whole period of time from September right through to February. So big changes in that domain of Pisces, and we'll go sign by sign to see how that's affecting everybody, and how this energy of reconsideration of what do I rely on, what do I have faith in, what do I believe? Do I still believe that thing that I even believed up until May this year? There's many political journey that has been made over the last several years, certainly as Saturn has been in Pisces, and especially as at the same time, pretty much Pluto moved into Aquarius. And there will have been, no doubt, a lot of disappointment around what people thought their political leaders could do, or what people thought their political party represented. And again, these are questions that are worthy of real examination. If you become defensive when you hear even this very mild questioning of your faith, of your belief in something political, something that feels reliable, then I suspect that you've put a lot of your identity into that, and that makes you very vulnerable. And this is where the Venus-Pluto opposition can be very useful, where you really get thrown into questioning your identity, where your notion of what you need or what you prefer and what makes you feel comfortable is thrown into question by the opposition with Pluto. That can, of course, represent something financial as well, as relation-based, as well as desire-based and preference-based. And of course, that has been part of the bigger story of Mercury going through Leo all through all through July and August. And only now in the beginning of September is Mercury finally moving into its own sign just in time for the first eclipse on the 7th of September. So really big times, and they require a bigger energy of consideration. And I think this would be something of a helpful exercise to go back and remember early 2025 up until May 2025. In fact, Mercury and Venus were connecting very powerfully with Saturn and Neptune at that time. If you will remember, those were the retrograde cycles of Mercury, Venus at that time. And in fact, when Saturn is preparing to leave Pisces for the very last time in February, just the week before that, both Venus and Mercury move into Pisces. And I find that very significant. It's almost like they're giving Saturn a final send-off. So with a Venus that will be in extremely high dignity because she will be in her sign of exaltation at the same time as Jupiter, which is ruling that, is in its sign of exaltation. So we can really emerge from this phase of about 4.5 months of this Saturn retrograde process. We can really emerge with something extremely dignified, profound, and creating a sense of something important that we can rely on, that again is unshakable, that you find that internal sense of unshakability, this place that you cannot be disturbed by because your faith is so strong. And that requires some introspection. And the retrograde cycles are always about some element of introspection. And the eclipse cycles are all about some new thing coming along, some new opportunity to shake things up. Initially, we have now coming up on the 7th, full moon, so a lunar eclipse on the North Node. So there'll be an awareness of this new thing. And then the shedding is already there in terms of the Sun and South Node. And then finally on the 21st of September, when we have this South Node solar eclipse at 29 degrees of Virgo, we're having another very profound shedding moment. So that's something I will come back to create a new video for. So let's go ahead and have a look sign by sign at how this will be affecting everybody. We'll see how you might find ways to work with this energy in a constructive way that allows you to feel more yourself, more resilient, and less concerned by all of the upcomings and goings of what's going on in the world. All right, so here we are back again for Aries, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. And when you think about yourself from the perspective of the Ascendant, it's where all of your life is taking shape. and where you might find events happening in the area of your life that is depicted by the house. If it's from the sun, that's your perspective, it's you, it's how you show up in the world. It can also affect your career or the sense of ambition that you might have or your purpose. And of course, it can be also with reference to men in your life and especially the father, your father. If you're thinking from the perspective of the moon, it's going to be your inner experience of life, your memory, your mind, your the way that you feel as you go through life, the way you feel as you navigate through these different events. And so all of them are different layers of your being. And don't disqualify the sun and the moon. Definitely listen for all three of those placements because we're working from a place of derived houses that gives the derived meaning from wherever we're looking, whether it's the ascendant sun or moon. So definitely applicable. Right. So for Aries, we have Saturn in your 12th house again, and where it was up until the 25th of May. So basically from the 7th of March 2023 until the 25th of May, you had Saturn going through your 12th house. So you can reflect on how that period of time was for you. What were you accomplishing? What were you thinking about? How were you transforming from the inside out? And that can be a very constructive place to have Saturn because it does very well in that area of your life where it's determining what is going on behind the scenes. In the case of, for example, bad habits or things that are being done that might actually take away from your ambition, take away from what it is that you'd like to accomplish. So Saturn in the 12th can be extremely helpful. There may have also been, especially in 2025, a big impact of family or the story of your family, the lineage, ancestral stories, especially because the North Node has also been there, and especially because Jupiter, since the 9th of June, has been in your fourth house of home and family and the mother. And that's the other thing the moon represents, by the way, the mother. Right now, you still have Neptune very, very close to Saturn, and Neptune eventually will also go back into your 12th house. But for now, let's focus on Saturn and what it's trying to teach you. So there's something about your inner experience of life or the hidden aspects of your life that might be how you connect to spirit in a very literal sense. What do you do to connect every day with your spirit, with your deeper, higher inner self? Depending on how you want to describe that. What do you actually do in terms of taking care of your inner experience of life? Are you aware of the unconscious motivators that are driving you throughout your day-to-day life? This can have something to do with faraway lands, especially because at this ingress we have the moon ruled by Jupiter in the 9th house, which is also similar in that quality of faraway lands or people traveling with a purpose, for example, traveling for a pilgrimage. And because Jupiter is in your fourth house, that also represents your psychological nature. What makes you happy? What makes you feel secure? What makes you feel like you can put your tools down and rest for a little bit? So this is a really good time to reflect on all of those different aspects of your life that you are deciding on, that you need to take action on, that you need to own up to. And if it is something to do with bad habits or addictions or things that you know you really aren't benefiting from, but you continue to do anyway, then this would be the time to really put that out of your energy field, really do something about that. You're putting more and more of your attention anyway in that 12th house because of the North Node. And this is certainly where the eclipse will be on the 7th of September. And I'll talk about that again. So this is a heads up, let's say, that you get for about a week before the eclipse in a very intensive way where you can put a lot of your attention on what is going on behind the scenes in your experience, what's going on in your intimate sense of you with reference to the cosmos or to God or spirit, whatever you want to call it, and also in the intimate nature of your life as well. So what goes on behind closed doors in your life? Is there something that you need to put order into? Is there something going on that shouldn't be going on, or that's something that is going on that is coming to an end? That can be a really important thing to discuss or reveal to the person or people that you're working with or dealing with if there's something going on behind the scenes that needs to be restructured This can involve work as well. Because Jupiter's in the fourth, it might be an aspect of working from home or working on something that makes you feel more secure in yourself. Because your ruler Mars is in the seventh house at this time, there's probably a lot of focus on partnerships in general. That will continue for another 3 weeks after this ingress of Saturn back into, or regress rather, of Saturn back into Pisces. So there's a lot here that's going to continue the story of who am I living with, working with, dealing with, um, who's on my side and who's not on my side. And that can be something that you're recognizing in terms of how you might show up in ways that are unconscious, where you might be not operating from integrity, for example, and this will really show that, or you might have become aware of that. Um, I think that's kind of it for now. And there's a lot for Aries coming up in the next few weeks because of that Neptune and Saturn going back into your 12th house, and especially because Mars is in your opposite sign. So it's not in its happy place. So there's going to be some need for you to step up in a different way in relationships, maybe finding, I don't know, finding peace in a place where there's been a lack of peace. The Mars is about to square Jupiter in the fourth house. So there might be something about your home relationships, or the dynamics around your marital partnerships. Mars rules your eighth house of intimacy, marriage, and so on. And the seventh house is your relationship, your marital relationship as well. Um, and of course, Venus, which is ruling your seventh house, is in the fifth house of love. And there may be something here, especially after the opposition to Pluto from the few days before, that you may have learned about how you show up in love, and are you being generous in love? Are you being generous towards the other? And how does that show up for you? Is that something that requires a little more attention? So it can be a very interesting time for you to go into retreat, Aries, and that can mean just literally staying home for half a day or a day and not seeing anybody, or it could actually mean going away and deciding you want to take a break and review things, especially between now and the end of November, because Saturn will station direct on the 28th of November at 25 degrees of Pisces in your 12th house. So, a great time for you to really reflect on your process of thinking, and especially because Uranus is in your third house, showing you now new ways of thinking, new ways of communicating, new insights, especially as it's really supportive for most of the second half of 2025 and into the first half of 2026 in terms of the sextile to Saturn, Neptune, and the trine to Pluto in your 11th house of other people, of groups, and your vision for your future. So there's a lot that will help you, but I think the key here is to slow down and listen, slow down and pay attention. That's one of the things with Saturn in the 12th, unless you're in a domain, a type of work where you're working in a capacity that's a little hidden, for example, in a hospital setting or a clinical setting or a boarding school or a convent type environment, monastery or something like that, or if you're doing a lot of research, then that also would apply here. There's something that you're reflecting on with reference to how you're working and what that's doing for you. But if it is on your personal level, on your psychological, emotional level, on the level of the unconscious or the spiritual aspects of your life, then this would definitely merit a step back from the busyness. And even if you are working in one of those more confined areas of life or working with foreigners, for example, then stepping back or questioning how you're working will really help, because there's something here with the sun in your sixth house approaching the south node, which is really describing something changing in the way that you're doing your everyday work. Your work implies your job, but also your sort of daily habits and routines. Something needs to be let go of. It's not working at this stage, and Saturn is going to help you understand that. All right, Aries, good luck with all of that. I'll see you in the next video. Taurus, Saturn is moving back into your 11th house of gains, the great gains, the things that you might earn from your career or things that might come to you in ways that are unexpected. Now, generally speaking, when Saturn is in the 11th house, you're not getting a whole lot of great gains. It tends to limit that, or it becomes something that is delayed or comes through some obstacle or some effort on your part. But since the North Node is also there, the potential is very strong, and especially if that has been reflected over the last, say, 2.5 years when Saturn was already in that part of your chart. Now Jupiter's in your third house, and showing you something about a new way of connecting, communicating, or reaching out into your expanded family, the extended, say, cousins, aunts, uncles, this kind of part of your family, or including your siblings, and could be siblings of your age or younger. And especially with the 11th house influence, it could be an elder sibling. Your ruler Venus is in your fourth house, so there might be something here about home. Also, that can be with Saturn in the 11th house, a realization that you have to focus on your future at this time. I'd say even if it's not to do with home, think of Venus in the fourth house as representing what do I need to feel safe? What do I need to feel secure? How can I stay connected with family, or what do I need in order to do that, to feel grounded and solid? And Saturn is showing you that there's something that needs to change, perhaps in the domain of your vision that you had, or what you thought was important in terms of your future and how you wanted to live forward into your distant future, or the vision that you had for your life. And it can also come along with a notion of having to restrict socialization, restricting either individual friends or the way that you show up in your socialization, in your social life, in your networks, in your connections with people that might share either spiritual or political or just otherwise social attitudes and objectives. So there's a lot here that suggests that you're reestablishing something, recalibrating something of how you want to go forward in life. And your personal mission with Venus in the fourth is to take care of yourself, feel safe, feel secure. That's always part of your story, Taurus, but it's definitely true now. When your ruler is in a fixed sign, and she's ruling Mars in the sixth house of your everyday, what do I do? How do I do it? What's my work? How do I need to navigate perhaps even health issues if there are any? Um, and I'm not suggesting that that means that there are health issues. It's just that that would be one indicator of having Mars there in the sixth house, that something requires your attention. Um, and then, of course, Uranus in the second house, just a few days afterwards, is going to back up into your first house. And I will do a separate video about that. But just to give you that heads up, that there's part of you that is recognizing how you've changed over the last 7+ years. And now that change is going to be kind of another reminder of how it is that you yourself need to step out into a different way of being, into a different role, perhaps, or a different vision for yourself personally, so that you can resolve whatever it is that seems to be no longer either ideal for you or no longer available to you in the direction that you want to take. Jupiter in the third also brings you a lot of connection with family or friends, connecting with your sense of what you want to either learn or discuss or reach out into in a way that helps you grow. So this is anyway a growth energy for you, but it certainly seems connected to something that feels more social, maybe more ambitious as well than what you were considering before, especially up until May, the end of May. So for many of you, that would have encompassed your birthday as well. Saturn moved into your 12th house on the 25th of May. And at that time, Jupiter was still in your second house. So it's new now what's happening here. And Jupiter in your third house is really pulling more of your attention into what you need to use your willpower for. Um, let's think about the third house in terms of exchanges with people, but also it's your everyday busyness and how you get around. What needs to change there? Or how do you need to learn new skills in order to manage your everyday? Venus is also, aside from being your ruler, Venus is also the exaltation ruler of Pisces, and she rules also Mars in your sixth house because she's ruler of Libra, which is the sign on your sixth house from the whole sign system. And with Venus in your fourth and referring back to both the sixth house and the 11th house, as well as yourself in the first house, there's something here that has a lot to do with how you are operating every day, what effort you put into your everyday, and that will require a shift somehow. And the Saturn lesson of the last 2.5 years is part of that shift. So how you're going to resolve that or unravel that is going to take shape over the next 4.5 months as Saturn goes back into the 25th degree of Pisces in your 11th house. So there's a lot of support here for you and a lot of, let's say, insight available to you with Uranus in a positive aspect to both Saturn and Neptune, and a positive aspect to Pluto, changing the way that people see you, changing the way that you see yourself out in the world, your role, your action, your ambition, with that Pluto in the 10th house, as it's been there already 2+ years. So a good time, Taurus, to realize there may have been things that you set aside or didn't take action on that require you to take action now. And that especially is unavoidable when you've got Mars squaring Jupiter from your 6th house. There's going to be a lot of effort, but it's effort that's putting in some kind of positive attitude as well. Jupiter in the third, although very, very busy, is in very strong dignity for you. It's exalted in Cancer. Therefore, whatever is going on here is highly supported by the people around you. So take advantage of that. It'll give you more mojo, more of a sense of purpose or confidence in what it is you're going on to do. I'll come back and we'll look at the eclipse cycle as well as the patterns of Uranus and other things that are changing as Uranus will station. I think I said with Aries, Uranus is going back into Taurus, but it's not until the 7th of November. In fact, what's happening on the 6th of September is that Uranus is stationing to retrograde back into the first house. So it's not going to get there until the 7th of November. So the change is happening, the change is filtering through. So good luck with this, Taurus. And it's definitely a time to ask for help. It may not be your habit to do so. Ask for support and also take action based on the things that you need to, that you already know, because these are placements with Saturn particularly that you've already understood in the recent past over the months of, let's say, March, April, and May of 2025. Okay, see you in the next video. Gemini, Saturn is moving back into your 10th house of your career, of how you show up in public life, how you show up out in the world, your role perhaps as a parent, or your role that connects you to your parents, the effects that you're of the condition of your parents. Are they well? Are they thriving? What's happening with your parents, your family dynamic might be changing, or you might be realizing something needs to change. This can also be your social status, so that can also represent your marital status. Since Jupiter is in the house of family, second house, second whole sign house in Cancer, that's something that indicates that there's a lot of input here coming from family that might involve you in things that you need to deal with in terms of family responsibilities. That might also involve children. Jupiter is being squared by Mars. Mars is in the 5th house of children, but that also represents love and creativity. The dynamic around, who do you want to invest in, and is that including yourself? Are you taking care of yourself? Jupiter in the 2nd house, especially in such strong dignity, can have you realizing your worth. And Saturn, when it goes back into the 10th house, especially as the North Node is still there, both of which are ruled by Jupiter in the 2nd, can really have you acting upon this new sense of capacity and worth. This may have been instigated by Uranus going into your 1st house, which happened in the beginning of July, and it will continue to be in your 1st house until the 7th of November, but it will station retrograde already on the 6th of September. So it's really moving slowly at this point. So especially if you have anything in Gemini that is around the first 0, 1, 2 degrees of Gemini, you're really under pressure to change in a significant way at this time, and it will come back again in April of 2026. So take all of the support that you can right now where you're starting to recognize how you have changed and how you want to change your relationship to your career or your social status or your overall ambition, your role out in the world, and how you address other people in that role, how other people see you as well. Big, important part of this. This might involve something to do with your father in general or with father type figures, authority figures as well, especially because Pluto is in the ninth, which also represents the father. For me, the ninth, like in the Indian astrological way, is in the ninth house, and particularly, and the 10th house represents the parents together or the social influences. So there's something here that anyway is changing with reference to that. And you can think of that as also guides of all kinds, like guides and people who show you what is right and what is wrong. You may have realized with Saturn in Pisces that you didn't have sufficient guidance, that you needed more guidance, and that you might have to become the authority that you actually lacked in your own life. And that would be a welcome use of Jupiter in the second, emphasizing your sense of self and expansion of sense of self, and ruling that North Node, which is still in your 10th house until July 2026, and then the Saturn that's there until February 2026. So it's an opportunity for you to really step up, step into this, whatever this role is that you're seeing now for yourself, or that you might be pushed into and you may not feel ready for it, but you somehow you are, because cosmically it's all there for you. So jump in. With Mars in your fifth house too, you might be feeling that you're ready to take a risk. That risk may be something to do with a relationship, especially because at the time Saturn is moving back into your 10th house, the moon is ruled by Jupiter also in your 7th house. So this could be something to do with a relationship, a business partnership, or some dynamic around other people in general. That can also involve, especially females, because the moon represents females, especially older ones, and most especially the mother, but also it can be all kinds of emotional dynamics as well. Your ruler, Mercury, has finished its retrograde cycle, which took it all the way through July and August, through the entire sign of Leo. And Mercury, at the time that Saturn is going back into your 10th house, Mercury is now well out of the shadow phase that it was in. That is now new territory. So this is another way of saying that you're entering into this new territory in the third house of communication and how you reach out into connection with people locally or through your words, through your way of exchanging ideas or belongings, things. It's like the marketplace, for example, where and how you might exchange. The moon also is in the house of the market in terms of the 7th house dynamic, where it can be your partner who you're partnering up with to work in business and where that might take place. So the 3rd house, 7th house, and 11th house share that kind of energy, and they're all part of this bigger story. So also, if you are an entrepreneur or you're working in different business exchanges or different ways, you might be thinking in terms of a new contract. So that would be something that Saturn will be showing you. Is this feasible? Is it the right direction? Have I learned my lessons and have I assumed my the role that I need to take in terms of doing this thing, this new thing? And Mercury is going to be even more supportive for you because it moves into your 4th house very soon. In the early days of September, it's going to move into your 4th house where it's in its other sign of domicile, but also in its exaltation. So your ruler, Mercury, will be in very strong dignity. It will be angular to you. It will be in domicile and exaltation at the time of the eclipse, both on the 7th and the 21st of September. So we'll have a look at that in another video. So you're really in the throes of something quite new that it's going to take you into a new dimension in your social life or in your professional life. All right, good luck with that, and I will see you in the next video. Cancer, you've got Saturn moving back from your 10th into your 9th house. So the 9th is where we find purpose and meaning. It's also known as the road to God or the house of Dharma. The 1st, 5th, and 9th houses are the Dharma. Why am I here? What am I doing? What brings me a sense of accomplishment and joy. And how do I do that? And since Jupiter is in your first house, this is even more powerful for you because it's ruling the ninth house. It also rules your sixth house of your everyday, your work, your health habits, the things that you do, your job. We could interpret that as your actual job, the ins and outs of your job as opposed to the career in the sense of something bigger than that. And with Saturn now going back in the ninth house, there's something that you're reflecting on in terms of that higher purpose. It may involve what you're doing and how you're doing it, especially if you're involved in anything to do with counseling, teaching, guiding people, advising people, or if it's something to do with spirit and something spiritual that you work with, or that you're hoping to learn from and develop. Um, the nodal axis, of course, is also there. So the south node with the sun at the moment is in the third house of understanding and learning in a pragmatic way, in a very practical way. And the ninth house is where the north node is, also ruled by that Jupiter in your first house, and also trining Jupiter, or being trined by Jupiter, I should say. And that's significant at this time when Saturn moves back into Pisces, and then Jupiter, that is ruling both Saturn and the North Node, is trining it from your first house. You could see that as an opportunity, as something that can be presented, or you are presented with options or an opportunity that you had perhaps an inkling of before the end of May, before Saturn moved into your 10th house, and now you see either the method or the relationship that will help you in that dynamic. So remember, Saturn rules your seventh house of relationships, as well as the eighth house of what you get from relationships, where we find Pluto currently. And also the aspect of father. The ninth house represents father and teacher figures as well. So there may be something going on in the life of your father. There may be something that you need to reorder, reorganize with your father, and it would be an absolutely auspicious time to do so, because you've got that beautiful trine from Jupiter in your own sign in your first house, first, whether it's solar house, lunar house, or ascendant. You have a lot of support coming from an exalted Jupiter in Cancer, and it's helping you resolve or redefine the quality of relationship, and including if you recognize where Saturn in the ninth house may have been that there was a need for guidance or a need for a good teacher, a solid role model to follow, and it wasn't there, then you start to you recognize how you yourself take on that pattern of role model, and you become more confident in that role. And so you can use yourself in a way, to replace what you lacked, especially if that's been the case for you over the last 2.5 years, or if you have Saturn, most especially if you have Saturn in Pisces natally. So this is for many of you, if you do have Saturn in Pisces, this is part of your cycle, your Saturn return cycle. So even more important that you pay attention to this last hurrah as Saturn spends the next 4.5 months in that ninth house. So actually, it's more than 4.5 months. Is it September through February? So it's going to actually be 5.5 months. So it's a substantial amount of time that allows you to cover old territory. Saturn will go back to 25 degrees of the ninth house. And at the time that it actually stations, which I will cover again in another video, when it stations direct again, it's at 25 degrees in a trine to Jupiter, remember, which is currently trining the North Node. So part of the story of what's going on here at the beginning of September will also re-emerge at the end of November, to re-emerge again as Saturn covers this territory once again in February. So Mars is in the fourth house. That has a lot to do with your home, but also maybe some frustration around the dynamics between home and career demands, or home and parents' demands, or family demands. It doesn't seem to be super problematic in the sense that Venus is in the house of family, is also in what you could consider the house of your earnings and money that comes to you in terms of possessions or savings and so on, money that supports you in general. And also Mercury has been in that second house, so there may have been a dynamic around either a change of heart or a change of awareness of your values or how you connect to your family. And either one of those, but especially Venus, because she's ruling your fourth house, is going to be quite supportive at this time, mitigating a little bit of that Mars in the fourth house. Let's say in another dynamic of that is it can have you extremely busy around fourth house matters, which is home and family and um, your homeland, even um, property where you live, especially as your ruler, the moon, at the time of the Saturn regress back into Pisces, is in your sixth house, where there may be some need to re-examine obstacles around home or difficulties or new plans, new opportunities potentially. It doesn't have to be necessarily difficult things, but it's sixth house. So there's something that you need to resolve, let's say, or something you need to overcome, something that needs to be done in a way that might resolve or let's say put to rest issues around housing, issues around again a feeling of potentially emotional security as well, because that fourth house also represents that emotional security, psychological and even material sense of safety and security, especially because Pluto and Uranus are in the 12th at this time. And so there's a lot of focus on what's going on behind the scenes, that what is inherited trauma, what is inherited patterns or lineage issues that come through this moment in time. If you please watch the introduction to this, because the overall introduction talks about the grand air trine that links the moon then to Pluto and Uranus and creates that kite that at this point, because I'm moving the dial, we've lost that kite. But just as Saturn moves in to your ninth house, the moon, or rather, just as Venus moves into your second house, the moon is actually at the beginning of the fourth house and creating this grand earth trine. And at the time of Saturn's ingress into Pisces, the moon is now in its first quarter phase in your sixth house. So whatever it is that needs to be resolved is going to be resolved in that phase of time between the 25th up until about the 1st or 2nd even of September, 25th of August. And that will give you some answers that might alleviate some of the effort or pressure or indecision around what home represents. Keeping in mind that you're building a square from Mars back to Jupiter, from your fourth house to your first house. So you are getting busy and active around this, but it will actually be something that is favorable to you because you've got that Jupiter protection in exaltation in your first house. Okay, so I think that's it for now. I have to stop my dog from being so loud. So I'll come back with Leo. So for Leo, sun, moon, and ascendant, you have a really interesting dynamic in your eighth house now, because Saturn is coming back from your ninth house back into your eighth house, where it's going to come closer again to the North Node. So that's been a focus for you for since January, for a very long time. And with Saturn going back in there, you might be realizing that there's something about either a connection to how you have to grapple with what you've inherited, patterns that you've inherited, or how you deal with what you receive from other people, whether it's shared resources or received patterns of behavior, for example. Saturn rules your seventh house of relationship, plus your sixth house of obligations and obstacles to overcome and day-to-day schlepping, basically. Sorry, one more moment. I've got to get this dog sorted. Sorry, Leo. So your eighth house is everything to do with what you gather from other people, what you receive. It's whether it be finances, like income that you haven't earned, or money that comes to you through an inheritance or through some kind of a windfall, or even money that comes through clients. Particularly so because Saturn rules your seventh house of clients and how you interact with people professionally. especially if you are working for yourself. So this dynamic now is showing you something about those aspects of yourself, what you've already understood going back to March 2023 and until the 25th of May 2025. But with Saturn now going back into the 8th house, you have Jupiter in your 12th house in really strong dignity. Jupiter in the 12th is it's a protection. It's like having an angelic protection. It's like having a guardian angel taking care of you. So there's also an extra emphasis, let's say, on connecting spiritually with your either ancestors, especially as it's in Cancer, or with your spirit guides or your sense of spirituality. Certainly with Neptune and Saturn having gone into your 9th house and Neptune still in your 9th house, that has been on your mind to a certain extent. And certainly, if it's not been about that, it's been at the very least about purpose. What is my purpose? Jupiter also rules your 5th house, which is about how do I express myself, my own creative drives, and the products of that, including children, for example, or your work of art or your entrepreneurial drives, for example. And your ruler is in your 2nd house. So there is something here to do with money and values in a really strong way. But the South Node is also in your 2nd house. And so most of the focus is going towards the 8th house. So it's about how you deal with other people in that context. And maybe you're letting go of a sense of what is or has been a value, or how you value yourself, how you establish yourself in value. Putting more of your attention in the 8th house can help you understand more of your psychological nature, or your maybe more mystical or intuitive or even magical side. It's the house of the occult. So similar to what we're doing here, it's one of the astrological houses along with the 9th. And so you might have actually this sense that you really would like to do something that brings out a more mystical quality to your life that's much less of a mundane thing. Certainly, Uranus is also contributing to that change in terms of how you see your future, how you see yourself, and it goes back into your 10th in November. So there's a part of you that is in this moment setting yourself up also for the review that Uranus is going to give you in a couple of months' time. I'll do a separate video about that. Mars is in your 3rd house, so that's also quite dynamic in terms of how to go about making a decision or finding something that you want to work with, or maybe having to work with more willpower, more energy, more ambition, for example, in terms of what has to be done right now. Mars in the 3rd can cause some upset in terms of conversations or dynamics with people. So be careful with all of this sort of behind the scenes energy, especially psychologically behind the scenes. You can maybe find yourself in arguments with people. It's going to be less of a problem for you because the ruler of that 3rd house, Libra, and where Mars is currently, is in your 1st house. So there's a lot of grace, not only from the Jupiter in the 12th, but also the Venus in the 1st house. So you are getting some kind of a sense of grace. So you might actually be in a place where you can negotiate diplomatically what it is that needs to be done, or find you can speak up for yourself, or speak up for a cause, or speak up for just to reach out into this new plan, this new idea, in a way that is more self-affirming than you might have felt comfortable before. As I often say with Leo, people have this idea that Leo is just sort of brave and courageous and full of beans and shows up in totally self-affirming ways. And this is a very rare Leo indeed. It's part of the lesson of being a Leo. It's part of how to learn how to be Leo, Leo 9. And often what happens is that people either go to the extreme of blustering and being too self-focused or too focused on being seen, being acknowledged, or the opposite can be true, where there's just not enough focus on self, and so there's a self-denial. And this is actually something that can be extremely helpful for you to explore right now with all of this, I think, very helpful support that's coming from deeper, sort of behind the scenes ways of seeing yourself. Especially as Venus in your first house anyway brings a lot of grace and charm and also desirability. People are interested to speak with you and hear what you have to say. And Venus rules your 10th house of career, as well as your third house of the words that you use. So this is a great opportunity, for example, if you want to apply for a new job, or if you have to do something that presents an idea or presents uh, a position that you want to engage in, especially because Mercury is also in your first house, and that was where Mercury has spent basically July and August, going back and forth in retrograde. So you've been reconsidering how you show up in a number of ways already. So although we've advanced the wheel here, actually at the time that Saturn is ingressing Pisces, the moon is in your fifth house. So it's just because we've been moving through, cycling through the signs. But actually, if you watch the opening section of this video, you'll see that the moon is in your fifth house and it's creating a first quarter moon. So there's something of this dynamic since the time of the new moon that was in your second house on the 23rd of August, and going towards the full moon that's happening on the 7th of September. We're at the halfway point when Saturn moves into your eighth house. So that fifth house also has to do with intellect, and it has to do with what you already know. It's the house of knowledge that you've kind of been gifted, or that you already have come in with, as well as your creative expression. And particularly because of the second house, eighth house dynamic here with Jupiter in the 12th, there's something that can come through you in a way that hasn't been expressed before, that may have been something that you've learned from either spiritual knowledge or traditional wisdom, inherited wisdom, patterns of thinking that will be more expressive, particularly developing as you go through between now and July of 2026, when Jupiter will move into your first house. At the same time, effectively, very briefly, very shortly before the nodes will change and move in, the North Node moves into your seventh house with the South Node moving into your first. So Saturn in your eighth can be a real opportunity for you to develop some aspect of yourself that is your deeper understanding of what it means to be human, a deeper understanding of all of the tools that we can be gifted spiritually in this human form. And especially with Jupiter in the 12th, you can really work to your great benefit on practicing meditation, practicing things that bring you a sense of self that is elevated. You have a lot of support for that, more confidence. It does seem that there's an image of yourself that's disappearing already because the sun, your ruler, is moving closer to the South Node. It's going to, of course, be part of this phase of the next couple of weeks of these eclipses. And so you want to think about yourself in that sense as well. What can I let go in terms of what I value, what I think or thought I used to value, what I think is important to me now, and maybe also in the way that you relate to your family or how your family relates to you. You might recognize that there's more that you need to do for yourself rather than waiting for family. Jupiter in the 12th house can also represent loss as well, and that can be financial loss, but it can be loss of something important, a loss of a loss of relationship, for example, a loss of a dynamic around what felt important, a loss of faith even. But as it is a very strong Jupiter, a very, very strong dignity, I suspect that that's not going to be something that will be a lasting problem, but rather more of something that you're going to have to be able to deal with, that you move your way through, especially because Jupiter is being squared by Mars in the third. So there's a lot of motivation and support for action that might come through how you communicate things as well. So I think that we've covered all the bases here. Yeah, it's an intense time, but I think for Leo in particular, if the deeper you go within, or let's say the more you become still and quiet, the more you will be able to accomplish. So rather than using that Mars in the third as a way of kind of running around all over the place, trying to figure things out outwardly, I think the more that you kind of settle inwards, you're going to find your way to greater productivity or greater results by sensing your way forward. So a lot of what is here is actually really favorable for that. All right, so Leo, I will see you in the next video. Bye bye. Virgo, you're having this experience of Saturn coming back into your house of relationship, where it left on the 25th of May. And that's going to be reestablishing something that feels like it needs to be given either a stamp of approval or a sense of lasting investment, let's say, lasting commitment, an awareness of the qualities of the partner, the type of person that you're interested in. And this can include a business partner or business type relationship with a client or different types of clients, for example, and of course, your life partner. So this is significant because if there is a desire to make a change, this will become really obvious between now and February. Or if there's a need for making a change, that will become very obvious. Jupiter is in your 11th house. This happens to be the favorite house for Jupiter. It does extremely well in the 11th house because it's all about gains and it's all about vision for your future. And it's also about how you connect with people. Your friends are like family. For Virgo, this is very, very beneficial. Jupiter is ruling your 7th house and therefore bringing you an enormous amount of support in the social houses. So the dynamic of friendships and the dynamic of relationship and partnership is extremely favored at this time. And Jupiter also rules your 4th house of your family, your lineage, your house and home, property. That also applies to your inner home, so your emotional sense of self or your foundation in terms of your psychological foundation. So things are really working at this time in your favor, and very, very favorable opportunities. And this can also be reflected in the upcoming eclipse, and I'll do another video about that. Your ruler is in the 12th house from you. So there's a lot that's going on maybe behind the scenes, or that you're actually still at this point only considering. You're just thinking about things and not yet ready to step out and take action on them until your ruler moves into your 1st house a couple of days after Saturn has moved into your 7th house. So Mercury has been in your 12th all of July and August, so you've had a lot of time to reflect on these things. They are the aspects of life that are a bit hidden from you. It might also involve some sense of loss. That may have been quite literal, may have been a financial situation of financial loss, or it can have been something that you realize you need to let go of, and that can be an egoic letting go. I need to let go of an aspect of myself, and that's all the more true because the South Node is in your 1st house, and that's part of the dynamic anyway. And the sun is in your sign at this time, so this is Virgo season, starting on the 23rd of August when we had this 0-degree Virgo new moon, and this is just a continuation of that story. And if you haven't seen the video I did about the Virgo new moon, then go back and watch that because there'll be a lot of information for you if you're a Virgo sun, moon, or ascendant. At the time of this ingress of Saturn moving back into Pisces, the moon was actually in your 4th house and ruled by Jupiter because it was in Sagittarius. So where we see it now in Capricorn is only because I've been turning the dial to show the different ascendant signs. But actually it was the first quarter moon that was happening in your 4th house after that new moon of the 23rd of August. So there's something about this area of life, the 4th house meaning home and family, and your inner experience of self, what you need to feel happy and secure, That can also represent mother. A relationship with your mother or the situation around your mother might be highlighted at that time. And at the very least, it's your emotional awareness that's coming to a peak at this time. And that will be something that becomes clear when the full moon occurs then on the 7th of September. And that will be in your seventh house with the North Node. So there's something new coming in. It's a culmination, but there's a newness about that, whatever is new around that lunar quality in the seventh house there. Uranus is in your 10th house at this time, and it was at the time of the ingress of Venus in your 12th house, which was on listen to the beginning, the introduction section talks about this, but on the 25th of August, Venus moved into your 12th house. She did that at the same time that the moon moved into your second house. And because your second house is Libra, Venus rules your second house. And that immediately created this very interesting kite. So there was a grand air trine between Pluto, Uranus, so Pluto in your sixth house of work and everyday life, everyday obligations, and Uranus in your 10th house of your career, your social status, and your ambitions. And then the moon in your second house of family and values and income, and it created this grand air trine between those houses. So those are known as the Artha houses, the houses of what is earthly, the houses that are about what we have to grapple with in our more material comforts, our material zone of life, the day-to-day sort of human three-dimensional existence. It's more the Artha houses. And so that was a really interesting dynamic that was also capped off in a kite formation by the dynamic of the mini grand trine that Pluto in your sixth and now Saturn in your seventh with Neptune in the eighth and Uranus in the 10th are forming still and will continue to form into 2026. So think about this period of time, especially if it's around your birthday. So if your birthday, basically if you're a Virgo, if you're a Virgo sun, but especially if you have an ascendant or a moon, let's say up until the, well, we could really say up until the ninth or 10th degree of Virgo, this will be a very significant time for you. And then, of course, it continues to be so after towards the impact of the eclipse season, but I'll talk about that separately. So if you're, let's say, in the first decan Virgo, this is an incredibly significant phase of your life that is there's offering so many new elements of change in a way that you will be able to tangibly notice, whether it's social status or financial status or the relationship dynamic, for example, or around work. So, so all really, really powerful stuff. Jupiter is blessing you from the 11th house for a very, very long time. Started in 9th of June, 2025, and continues all the way to the end of June, 2026. So make the most of that at this time. And it's part of this bigger vision, this bigger sense of what's possible for you. And Saturn is saying, are you doing this with the right people in the right format? Have you learned the lessons? And have you put good boundaries between you and another in such a way that you don't feel yourself being compromised? And are you being heard? Are you getting what you need, let's say, out of the relationship instead of bringing the strays home, which is classic Virgo, ascendant, sun, or moon. All right, so I think this is going to be a very lovely time and certainly a very dynamic time. Make the most of it. This is about personal growth in a very literal sense for Virgo, Sun, Moon, and Rising. So I'll see you in the next video. And I'm just going to come back to the Saturn ingress because we had a Libra rising for that. So then I can just continue along my merry way. And we've got our moon back in Sagittarius. So this is for Libra, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. And this Saturn retrograde is bringing Saturn back into your sixth house. As Saturn goes into your sixth house, there's something that you're reminded of or recognizing you need to take action on. or you are ready to restructure, or you are realizing you must surrender or change in some way around your day-to-day life, around your work, around your obligations and contracts, around things that you are promising or over-promising to people. One of the reasons that you've got such a tendency, Libra, to overpromise or overdo for people is because you've got Jupiter, our Jupiter ruled sixth house. So you've got Pisces on the sixth. So you just feel sorry for everybody. You just feel like you want to show up for everybody. And Saturn goes through there only once every 29 years, 27 to 29 years. And this is your big chance to really put a lid on that and recognize where it is that you need to draw a line and say, okay, this is the extent of my capabilities. This is what I can do, and this is what I'm happy to do, and not offer too much. This is all the more important to become very clear about because Jupiter is in your 10th house. So there will be a lot of effort and ambition, let's say, around your career. You'll be visible, you will be supported in your career. There will be a lot, and if it's not career, it's the way you show up socially, that people will see you in an expanded role that can involve a dynamic of that might be around a new job or a new proposal or something that is happening that expands your sense of every day, because Jupiter is now trining that North Node in the week leading up to this ingress of Saturn or regress of Saturn into your sixth and also into the following week, which is the eclipse happening on the 7th. Let's see. And then, of course, on the 6th, just before the eclipse, Uranus is going to be stationing retrograde. So it's very slow at this time. And it's trinal to you. And of course, it's trining back to Pluto. So there is this grand air trine at the moment that is quite strong. That actually was triggered. If you listen to the introduction, you'll see that was triggered particularly so when your ruler Venus moved into your 11th house on the 25th of September, pardon me, it's 25th of August, and Venus moved into your 11th house into Leo. And at the same time, the moon moved into your first house and caused this kite formation. So that was extremely karmic or very fated, and it involves you directly. So there's something that is triggering this pattern of big growth around your everyday life, around your work, around your sense of what is possible for you. And especially with Mars in your first house, you're recognizing there's certain things that you need to do. You have to step up to the plate and do things that may not be in your comfort zone. They may be things that you feel are a little beyond you, or you're not quite sure how to grapple with making a choice around these different things, but it's necessary. And all roads are pointing to this new thing. The South Node in the 12th, where we find the Sun, is also part of this equation because it's telling you where you need to let go of patterns that are self-harming or self-deprecating or self-destructive even in some extreme cases. Mercury has been back and forth in your 11th house pretty much the entire journey through the 11th house, or at least the first half of it through July and August. And now Mercury is ready to move into your 12th house to prepare for the eclipse dynamic. But having Mercury there now with Venus gives you a lot of focus. Also, your ruler, Venus, gives you a lot of focus also on your future. You've already had 2 months now of reconfiguring the sense of what's coming up ahead of you. Now, what is it that you want? How you might associate with people, how you might earn money, or where's money coming from? This is the house of gains as well. So you might have found that you actually have been able to gain money in a way that was not necessarily anticipated, but it's certainly very welcome. Venus rules your 8th house also, which represents money that you receive from others or money that comes to you through other things like refunds, reimbursements, tax rebates, inheritance, and so on. So it can be very favorable from a financial point of view, but something requires you to step up and to do something about it. So Jupiter is about to be squared from your 10th house of your social status and how you reach out into the world. It's about to be squared by Mars in your first house. So that's big action. It's an opportunity for you, because it's Mars in your first house, to take advantage of something that can expand your sense of participating out in the world. This is significant because it's visible, it's action oriented. It's going to be something that brings you benefit, as your ruler Venus is in the 11th house of gains and socializing. So you can even find that this might include how you bond or connect with people, particularly so because the moon at this time, which is ruling your 10th house, ruling that Jupiter, is in your third house of your friends and day-to-day acquaintances, as well as siblings and cousins and extended family, but also your local space where you live. This might have something to do with home and where you live as well, because that's, as I mentioned, it's the third quarter moon that is focusing our attention into the third house at this time, where Saturn is going into the sixth, where the original story of the moon was created in your 12th house at 0 degrees of Virgo. And then this is preparing the following week's moon, which is the full moon, which is the eclipse in your 6th house of work. So there's something here that's really quite innovative. I find it very supportive of you, and especially supportive of change that you instigate. Saturn has already instructed you back in the, let's say, certainly April and May, maybe even March, April, May, but certainly April and May. Saturn already let you know what's going on here. And now Saturn is coming back and saying, let's wrap this up. Let's do it this way. Now you have this opportunity, because when Saturn was there in your 6th before, Jupiter was in your 9th house. It was not in very strong dignity. It was happily in your 9th house, but focusing more on what it is you need to know and understand. And now Jupiter in the 10th is saying, how do I show up? How do I do this thing? How do I reach out? And now this is me doing more of that. This can also be directly linked to a family responsibility, especially because Jupiter in the 10th house of parents, social dynamics, but family authority figures, is ruling Saturn, which represents your 4th house. And Jupiter also rules your 3rd house of early childhood and siblings and so on. So Saturn also rules your 5th house of children, where we find Pluto. So there could be something here that's quite significant. Your ruler Venus just on the 25th of September, just a few days before the Saturn regress into your 6th house, Venus was opposed Pluto, and that was from your 11th house of your sense of what you want to see overall in your life, how you want to reach out into society or friendships and networks. And Pluto is saying, yeah, but you've got to change the way you show up. You need to be seen. You need to be acknowledged. So everything here is really pointing to that, Libra. It's all pointing to that. All right, so I think I've covered all of that. Libra, make the most of this, and I'll see you in the next video. Scorpio, this Saturn regress is happening in your 5th house as it moves back into Pisces, where it was up until the 25th of May. And now you have an opportunity to review issues around love, romance, your personal creativity, and your self-expression. So how you want to show up in terms of how you reach out into your everyday self, your everyday way of being you. And also with reference to children, anything that might affect the children in your life, or how you might be either working with children that you already have, or children that you're planning to have. Reconsideration around becoming a parent is one way that this can take shape. This wouldn't be new. It's something that you've already been grappling with, and this might involve issues around an intimate relationship, around how love is expressed. You could look back over the last 2.5 years, and of course, then that means going forward over the next 5-ish months, and examine, how have I been blocking love? How have I been wanting more love, but not able to express that, or not able to let it in, or not able to find it, potentially? But even if you have found it, am I also somehow sabotaging it? Now, Mars is, speaking of sabotage, in your 12th house. Your ruler, Mars, is in your 12th house of self-undoing and hidden enemies and things that go on behind the scenes. So, of course, the greatest hidden enemy is the one that is in our own head, our own mind. The things that we do to ourselves are far more damaging than the things that others do to us. And so with that Mars there, with Venus in the 10th house, your house of social status and how you show up, how people see you, you might become more aware of this dynamic of what is going on behind the scenes in relationship. Venus is also the exaltation ruler of your 5th house of romance and love and so on. And she rules your 7th house of relationships as well. So there's a part of you that is probably grappling with your connection with people, with intimacy, with your dynamic around potentially the money side of relationship, potentially, or certainly the intimacy aspect. How am I showing up in intimacy? Pluto is changing you in a very, very big way, and that's already been for 2 years, plus over 2 years, as Pluto's been going into your 4th house. It went back and forth into your 4th house, but it's pretty much there now for the next 19 years or so. So this is part of that bigger story of Pluto changing your sense of foundation. What do I rely on? What do I need to feel secure, feel happy, emotionally, psychologically, materially? Where do I live? As part of this bigger question. And Saturn is ruling Pluto now from the 5th house with the support of Jupiter in the 9th. So there's a greater vision. What is life all about? Jupiter is about to be squared by your ruler. So Mars is in the couple of days after this Saturn regress into Pisces. Mars is going to be squaring Jupiter exactly, but it already is really at the time that that Saturn moves into Pisces. So there's big action to be taken, and in this case can have a lot of impact in terms of what you believe, what you have faith in, what is important to you in terms of your sense of purpose, the vision that you have. Jupiter rules your house of values. It rules Sagittarius in your 2nd house, and that's where we find the moon. And the moon itself is ruling Jupiter while it's in Cancer. So there's an interesting dynamic there between your 9th house of your sense of purpose, higher wisdom, your sense of faith, how you might teach that or present that or learn from people who do that, and the impact that that would have on your value or family for that matter, because of course the sign of Cancer where Jupiter is all about family, particularly mothers. So Jupiter is ruling not only your 2nd but the 5th house, and that dynamic there can also show you where your values are going to be decisive in understanding what to do about that Saturn in the 5th house. How do I manifest my love? How do I manifest my humanity? How do I manifest what it is that I want to understand about being human? So this is actually quite a very spiritual moment for Scorpio. Uranus in the 8th house of deep transformation, crisis, shared resources, things that need to be dealt with in creative and innovative ways. It's going to keep you on your toes now for the next 7 years, but it's already there at this point in a trine to Pluto in your 4th. And it was in a trine at the 25th of July when Venus just moved into your 10th house and opposed Pluto in your 4th house. It was where the moon itself was at the 0-degree point of Libra. So it was triggering this incredible kite formation that was quite supportive and dynamic, offering you an opportunity to look at that 12th house area of your life, really explore this notion of what I have faith in, what do I believe in, what is the modus operandi in relationship, where do I find harmony, what is fair and just. That's another representation of both Venus on the human level and Jupiter on the divine level. or let's say the higher level of wisdom. So these are really interesting dynamics to navigate, especially as the moon in the second house can really have you focus a lot on how you find your own self-worth or your own value through having a purpose or through having a vision for your life. That is changing, certainly, because of the South Node going through the 11th house. So the old vision or the old future plans are no more. There's something changing that is either by design because you have to, or because you decide now, this is no longer who I am. I don't feel it anymore. The North Node is in the 5th house where we find Saturn, and that's getting more energy from the Saturn itself and from the Jupiter in the 9th to get you focused on your purpose, on how you express that creatively and how you make it last. And that can also be, again, around the notion of children, having them or not having them, or having a new dynamic in the relationship with children, if you have any. If not children, then it can be your creative projects or your business projects, because 5th house can also, it represents your entrepreneurial skills, entrepreneurship, and so on, as well as intellect and wisdom that you've gleaned from other lifetimes, which is also what you're putting in use at this time. I think we've said it all, Scorpio. I think that's it for now. Yeah, you probably, if you're listening to this, you are already somebody quite spiritual, but this is a time to really deepen that, really advance that, and with a long-term vision of how you want that to take shape. All right, so I'll be back with more about the eclipses on the back of all of this, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye. Sagittarius. So Saturn has moved into your 4th house. That would have been a very sticky place for the last couple of years, not necessarily very comfortable. There will have been moments for many of you that felt sad or depressing or lonely and isolated. Maybe some loss and discomfort around family, your lineage, mother, or parents in general, because Saturn is on that axis of the 4th and 10th, and also we find the nodal axis there since January, so that emphasizes the process of that dynamic. And Jupiter now is in very strong dignity, so your ruler before was not in very strong dignity when Saturn was moving through that 4th house. So it was there was a dynamic of chaotic nature, that especially the year up to June, a more chaotic nature, something very unsettled, that won't have been very easy. And now with Jupiter in the 8th in high dignity, it's an exaltation in Cancer, in a place that allows you to see with eyes of spiritual clarity or psychological clarity what it is that you need to learn and understand. And that's the 4th house zone where we find Saturn now. So Jupiter is ruling that 4th house, and it rules you, yourself. And that's where we find the moon at the time that Saturn moves back into the 4th. The moon is in your house of self in its first quarter phase. So following the new moon at 0 degrees in your 10th house of your career and how you show up, and your perhaps reference to your parents or yourself as a parent. And now the moon has shifted. So by the 1st of September is in your 1st house. And that's when you look up in the sky and you see the half moon in the sky. This is the first quarter phase. And that's going to then complete at the eclipse when it becomes a full moon on the North Node in your 4th house. So this particular moment of the couple of weeks from that Virgo new moon through this Saturn regress is really focusing the attention on house and home, your inner security or your home, physical home security, your sense of what you need to be happy, to be stable. That stability may have come at a cost of having to be alone for some of the last couple of years, but that isolation is productive, and especially now because Saturn is ruled by a much more dignified Jupiter that wants you to know, it wants you to understand. Jupiter is going through the 8th house of life's mysteries and the aspects of what is mystical, what is occult, what is magical and hidden from us. This is also what you might understand about it in inherited patterns and even financial inheritance. That's possible as well. Although, in this specific case, Mars is in your 11th house of gains, not necessarily easy in terms of gains because it's in poor dignity. It's considered to be in exile or in detriment. Venus, which is ruling Mars, is in your 9th house, and so the gains are more likely to be, let's say, less likely to be financial, more likely to be philosophical, in terms of awareness, for example. And again, there will be the exception that proves the rule, but it is not likely that the Jupiter in the 8th will bring you, specifically at this time, any great gains financially. That can come later. It's not to say it can't come, it can come later. Right. And so that dynamic now with Saturn in your 4th house is an opportunity for you to recognize what it is that you need to establish that makes you unshakable. I mentioned this in the beginning of the talk where I was talking generally about these aspects, and this applies to you quite specifically because it's your ruler Jupiter that is influencing this Saturn. And because it's coming from this place of psychological dynamics and the upheaval that can come from feeling unstable or feeling that things are just too much, and that can happen when, for example, the North Node is in the 4th house. It can be overwhelming, too much going on, too much emotion, too much about family, too much about lineage, or about what has to be done with the house or with property or something like that. So you want to understand where your limit is, and Saturn can help you with that. Put a lid on it or put a structure around it and say, okay, this much we know, this much we can handle. Saturn, when it's with the North Node, can cause a lot of disruption. It's a lot of things that need to be dealt with. And Jupiter is helping deal with those things in a way that it couldn't before, because Jupiter wasn't in strong dignity before. So you are getting help now in a way that you didn't experience before. So don't think about this in terms of the old transit of Saturn through this part of your chart that you experienced up until the end of May. Mercury is in your 9th house along with Venus, and Mercury has been retrograding there, trinal to you, which is very favorable, giving you a lot of time to reflect on your sense of purpose, your vision, your belief, your faith, what you find important, what is your, let's say, what are the insights that you want to live from? What's your ideology or your faith or religion that you want to live from? And this is something that you are getting some benefit from. And then Mercury becomes even more powerful as it enters your 10th house during the eclipse phase. So just a couple of days after Saturn enters your 4th, Mercury will enter your 10th. And this will bring a lot of support or understanding to the area of your social status that can include your marital status, as well as career and how you reach out into the world, or how you might need to communicate around those things. So that's going to be particularly strong throughout September, especially as the 21st of September, the eclipse is actually happening in your 10th house. So the one that's happening on the 7th is happening in your 4th house of home. And this is where that dynamic is anyway, with the nodal axis there since January. The dynamic is this tension between what you want for yourself and how you need to care for yourself, and what you need to support yourself, and what you have to let go of in terms of your social expression of that, or the way you show up in your career, or even the sense of ambition around your career. So all of this will be very clarifying through September, but already beginning actually on the 23rd rather, of August, when we had that new moon at 0 degrees of your 10th house. And of course, Uranus is still teeter-tottering between your 7th and 6th house. That's another video. But just keep in mind that there's a very strong focus on the degree, the first degree of into the second degree of Gemini across the way from you, because Uranus is slowing down to station retrograde on the 6th. So there's something in the dynamic of relationships that is also adding to this mix for Sagittarius that will rebound and affect you as well. And yet it's not quite ripe, it's not ready. It's going to take form probably, or become more clear as of April next year. 26th of April, it moves back into your 7th after a period of time from the 7th of November to the end of April when it's in your 6th house of work. So lots of options for you to reflect on yourself. And being a wee bit selfish at this time is really constructive for you, Sagittarius. With receiving, practicing receiving. That's a good one for Sagittarius. Practice receiving support from others, whether that's financial or emotional, and that will really charge you up. It will allow you to find yourself in a way that allows you to move forward, especially when Jupiter moves into your 9th house, when you're going to be feeling literally on fire to do and learn new things. All right, Sag, I'll see you in the next video. Capricorn, your ruler, Saturn, is now moving back into your 3rd house where it left on the 25th of May. And it's now in a really interesting dynamic with Jupiter, which is in your house of relationship. So prior to this, Jupiter was in your 6th house. And it was a lot about work, a lot about challenges around work. And now what is qualitatively different about this Saturn journey is that Jupiter is in extremely strong dignity. And it's in a quadrant house. So when houses 1, 4, 7, and 10 are affected by important planets, there's something that's going to show up powerfully in your life, and especially as Jupiter is in very solid dignity in the house of partnership and marriage, and it's ruling that Saturn, your ruler, in the 3rd house of decisions to be made or using your willpower, communicating something, exchanges, learning, practical wisdom, and the everyday experience of life. It's very, very supportive. So people that you meet at this stage, at this point in time, let's say over the next few months, but especially around this time of late August, early September, are significant for you, particularly after the 1st of September. Your exaltation ruler, Mars, is in the 10th house. So there's something about career that is really a strong focus. It's an ambition. It's a drive to do more or do something in a new way. Try to find your place of balance or a place of maybe harmony with people in a way that is not so easy, because it's Mars in Libra. And Mars in Libra, it tends to compromise. So you're not going to get the best out of that Mars, even though it's 10th. So it's going to get some accidental dignity and be quite strong. But Venus is in that 8th house. And so you could actually be in for some remarkable gains at this time, or coming from this time, where things just kind of take shape based on what is changing around your work dynamic. Or around the drive that you've been showing around career. Uranus is in your 6th house of everyday work, and that has been trining Pluto in your 2nd house of money, income, resources, family as well, everything that supports you. And so there's a potential here for some strong gains that are coming through a recognition of the new dynamic that you're working with that may include new partnerships. So Venus and Mercury in your 8th are actually offering some big support in that way. Yeah, Mars is ruling the house of gains for you, the 11th house, as well as your 4th house of home. So it's something to do with maybe a spouse, marital partner, and again, what you get from clients or business partners. can be involved in this vision of what you need to negotiate or how you need to move forward or find your goals, let's say, in terms of career, your ambitions around career at this time, that will bring gains, most especially after Mars moves into its own sign of Scorpio, which is the third week of September. And Venus will still be in Leo at that time. So there's still that opportunity to receive something from others that's very pronounced at this time. Venus will have opposed on the 25th of August rather, Venus will have opposed Pluto. So there was something you already understood about this dynamic of what you gain. This can also be about marriage or about intimacy. Venus rules your fifth as well, house of love, romance, and so on. She's in the eighth, in the house of intimacy. And that opposition to Pluto can have you feeling like you need to reveal something more of yourself in a literal sense or in a metaphorical sense. Also, because Venus, immediately upon moving into your eighth house of intimacy, but also transformation and what you receive from others, as well as it's the house of crisis where things need to come, they kind of come to a head. It was trining Neptune and Saturn, and that's actually quite supportive. So there's something there that is like saying, look, we know that this is a new thing, that this needs to change, and there is support for that change. That's a long run, long-term support. Venus trining Saturn is quite supportive energy. There's so much going on at this time, it's almost mind-blowing. It's hard to actually enumerate all of it, especially as I'm not looking at your natal chart. So it's even harder because I can't tell exactly how it's all going to pan out for any of the signs. But here we are with Capricorn. So Capricorn, this might also lighten your mood a little bit, where Saturn in the fourth can be quite heavy. And that can be where you're managing a lot of heavy emotions, or there may be something about just finding it difficult to feel at ease or find peace. There can be a feeling that the family issues or lineage issues are a burden or a challenge. When Saturn is in the fourth, and that depends on the nature of your Saturn, the nature of your sign ruler. But with Saturn going back into third, things are lightening up in a nice way, especially because Jupiter is so much more favorable, not only because it's in the seventh, but also because it's exalted in Cancer, as opposed to being in the sixth, which is challenging, and also in its detriment. So it's in the sign opposite to the sign that it rules. So there's a really interesting dynamic here that brings you opportunities in a way that might come through your innovative qualities, something that you're innovating, communicating new ways, communicating or learning new skills, new ideas that come through you. The big focus is there in the third house. That's about siblings, extended family, your everyday commitments, everyday stuff that you're doing, all of which is changing in a really profound way. Also because of the Uranus ingress into your sixth that happened in July. And the moon, just at this moment of the Scorpio, sorry, I'm getting a little tired now. The Saturn regress into Pisces. The moon is at its first quarter phase. So it started in your ninth house, where it started a new phase, a new cycle in your ninth house, which is about your purpose and maybe also connection with Father. How you reach out into knowledge and wisdom and spirit and what you believe and have faith in. And now with the moon in the 12th house and ruled by a really dignified Jupiter in the 7th, and now with Saturn in the 3rd house, you may actually have a deeper sense of faith or an awareness, at least, of that. And that will increase as you go through September, because that's the focus, really, of the eclipse cycle of September. So it's part of that story. And Jupiter, of course, is trinal now to the North Node. So Jupiter is trining Rahu, and it's going to bring more awareness, more opportunity through somebody a positive influence that comes through a dynamic of relationship that might also be uh, a practitioner, for example, a doctor or a lawyer or a counselor, or somebody like a teacher that is bringing you ease and comfort or benefit that is more than just a relationship in terms of a one-on-one relationship, but something that shifts your vision for yourself as well. And of course, encountering a new aspect of your spouse can do that, as well as encountering a new person can also do that at this time. So, mind expanding stuff for Capricorn. All right, so I think we've said it all, Capricorn. Pretty sure that's it. I will definitely come back in another video to talk about the eclipses and again to talk about Uranus, which will then be retrograding back into your fifth in a couple of months' time. Okay, I'll speak to you then. Bye-bye. Aquarius, this is, of course, this is a really significant time for you because your ruler, your traditional ruler Saturn, is in your second house again. And this time, with your ruler in the second house, it's in very, very positive dignity, or at least support, by a very dignified Jupiter in your sixth house. So there's something that you find more joyful, more expansive, more uplifting, more positive that can be around finances, or it can be around resources that are at your disposal, or things that you are enjoying about your work based on the values that you feel you're relating to. And this is not just because of that Saturn moving back into the second house, but because the Jupiter in your sixth house suggests that there's a real desire to do the work that you're doing, or to live your life, the life that you're living based on what you value. The moon also is ruled by Jupiter, and it's up in the 11th house, and that's also really favorable. So when the moon is in the 11th house, often there's a lot of support from people that you know, or that there can be just a general sense of goodwill. They're not necessarily lasting. It's something that can be a fleeting opportunity, but a nice connection with people or with a vision. And the 11th house is your vision for the future, what it is that you'd like to experience going forward in life. And certainly this is somehow hinging on your everyday experience of your health and your habits, how you are able to grapple with a bunch of different aspects of your life. The modern ruler, Uranus, is in your fifth house in a trine to Pluto, which is in your first house, of course. So it's supportive of you showing up in a different way. This has been part of the bigger story of Pluto, but the Uranus makes it easier, but at the same time can bring instability, because that instability can be around investments or being a little bit impulsive around things like that. Saturn in your second can help you if that's been something that you're grappling with, because the North Node in Jupiter, when it was ruled by a Jupiter that was in less good dignity, especially when it was in the fifth house, may have had you overspending or obsessing around money, or not dealing with money in a good way or helpful way, or a long-term way. Whereas now with Saturn going in there, ruled by a Jupiter that is exalted, thinking a lot about the bigger picture, the long-term plans, you can really find yourself investing more wisely, sorting out problems with the family, or dealing with things in a way that creates a new structure, a new relationship with family. And this is part of the eclipse phase. It's part of the eclipse cycle. So you're already moving in that direction, and then things will shift as well as you go into the first couple of days, and certainly the first week of September. Venus is in your seventh house, along with Mercury, where Mercury has been going back and forth July and August in retrograde cycle in your seventh. So with Venus now in the seventh, there's a lot of support around you from others that comes through relationships, a lot of benefit from relationships, a lot of peace that can come through relationships, harmony. Venus also rules your fourth house of your inner sanctum, as it were, your sense of your foundation, psychological or emotional foundation for what makes you happy, home as well. So something to do with that seems to be shaping up in a way that's much more conducive to more harmony. Venus rules your ninth as well, where we find Mars. So there's something that you're understanding about your vision, your purpose, what it is you're ready to fight for, what your ideology is inviting you to fight for. And that's going to be brought out in the third week of September when Mars moves into your 10th, and you then manifest something that you've been reflecting on since mid-August, or even early August, with Mars moving into your ninth. And that may involve a new partnership because of that Venus part of the story. It may involve a new dynamic around being in partnership on behalf of a business plan or an idea that is something you've been reflecting on for the last few weeks. Let's see what else is coming up. Yeah, so the moon is in the 11th. I also mentioned that already about the social part of that. But the moon in the 11th can also have you focusing on bigger visions in a way that may not be entirely realistic. And so you want to take care, especially because Neptune is in the third, of snake oil salesmen or buying into something that is not fully formed in terms of an idea or a plan. That Saturn can help you sort that out. If you've already invested in something or you were thinking of investing in something, whether that be energetically or financially, you will have a better sense of what is important to you after this phase, this early part of September, so that you don't jump into things in a way that's a little bit, dreamy or based on something that's not entirely thought out. Jupiter in the sixth can be very gung-ho about adding on new tasks, new ideas. Oh, I can do that, and I'll just add this in as well, and I'll get that sorted as well. So beware of that with Jupiter in the sixth, especially because Mars is about to square it from the ninth. And so there may be this vision or this ideal of how it is that you want to do something on based on a goal or a spiritual quest or a vision that you have for an outcome, but it might have you biting off more than you can chew. That's an important thing to understand, because that Mars is not in strong dignity and it's squaring a Jupiter that is in very strong dignity. It's going to bring you a lot more work, but with maybe a sense of, I wasn't really clear about my direction or about what it was that I was trying to sort out. So you might want to keep the plan in mind and not yet take action on it until Mars is much more firm. Let's say by the third week of September, when it moves into your 10th house, that will be a great opportunity for you then to strive in that new direction. And I will come back again with another video about the eclipse cycle that's coming up. So you're going to have an eclipse in the second house, a full moon eclipse, a lunar eclipse in the second house, and that is related to the lunation that started in your 8th house at 0 degrees, the new moon at 0 Virgo, where at the time that Saturn goes into your money house, into your family house, into the house of everything that supports you, and including your sense of your value, the moon is actually in your 11th house of gains and friends and how you reach out into your future. And it's ruling that Jupiter in the everyday part of your chart. So there's a cooperation here, and you will realize what this is about, or you will recognize what it is that you are gaining, or what you're realizing in terms of the inner transformative process of the 8th house when the eclipse happens on the 7th. So we're in a phase of developing something. So you want to kind of forward plan, but without a sense of being so certain that things will pan out the way that you expect them to. Right. And one final thing, if you listen to the introduction again, you will notice that there was a 0 degree moon that entered into your 9th house just at the moment that Venus entered into your 7th house. So Venus opposed Pluto from your 7th to your 1st, from the 25th to about the 28th of August. And just as she moved in on the 25th, sorry, 25th to the 28th. Just as she moved in on the 25th, the moon moved into your ninth house, and it created this incredible kite that includes your Pluto in the first, your Saturn, well, at the time, Saturn in the third with Neptune, but they're still very, very strongly conjoined, and the sextile back to Uranus, and then that was the trine back to the moon. So this is a really interesting period of time to explore. Look back on that week around the first phase of the new moon at the 0 degree point in Virgo, and know that this whole cycle that is going to wrap up at the 29th degree of your eighth house is a bigger cycle that's going to have an impact for many, many months to come, if not years to come. So there's something here that is already in the making that you're able to work with, and you plan around this thing that you recognize is coming from a sense of your value, your purpose, your mission, if you like, and how you can cope or deal with what is required to get that sorted. Partly by showing up in new ways, in new creative ways, new inspired ways of being you. All right, Aquarius, I will see you in the next video. Pisces, of course, this is very important for you, sun, moon, or rising, especially if you have anything at the, let's say, 23 degrees to the last degree of Pisces, but most especially around 24, 25, 26 degrees of Pisces, where Saturn is going to be hovering at the end of November. But really, we're looking at the last 7 degrees of Pisces very, very powerfully. And so this is a check-in, and how are you taking responsibility for you? It's a bit of a reality check based on where you thought you might grow into something, or you thought you might be able to deal with something on your own. And now, over the last 3-4 months of Saturn being in your second house, you're realizing, wait, I'm not sure I'm up for this. I need to do more. I need to do X, Y, Z, or I need to show up differently. I need to be more serious in myself. I need to be more disciplined. This is all Saturnian stuff. Now, Jupiter, your ruler, which is also ruling the North Node and Saturn in your first house, is in your fifth house of good luck. It's a very fortunate impact. So the first, the fifth, and the ninth houses are considered fortunate, and especially with reference to the Dharma. Why are we here? What are we doing here? And so there's a bigger story here that is going on that feels like now there's a creative self-expression, or there's a positivity around connecting, around feeling love, around bonding with a loved one or a lover or your children, or the desire to have children, and the recognition of how you're now preparing for that, or how you're ready for that, is very, very supported at this time. Your creative output is also very supported, and Jupiter also rules your 10th house of your career. And at the time that Saturn is moving back into your first house, the moon itself is in the 10th, and the moon rules your fifth house, and Jupiter itself is ruling your 10th. So they're cooperating with each other in a slightly hapless way. It's called a mutual generosity because it's not actually a traditional aspect, but nonetheless, they're in each other's signs, and so there's an exchange that's helpful. There's a beneficence that comes through that, and there's something here about recognizing your role in, pardon me, your role in society, or your role as a parent, or your role in life with a parent. Something to do with either parent, or particularly the moon can represent the mother, for example. But the dynamic of the fourth house and 10th house is anyway activated by the ingress of Uranus in the fourth of the second week of July. Uranus, just a few days after Saturn moves backwards into your first house, Uranus is stationing retrograde as well. So there's a very strong emphasis on this new thing that's taking you into a new place in reference to your home, your lineage, your family of origin, your internal, let's say, safety or security system, what makes you feel more solid and grounded. This may not be easy at this particular point because of that Uranian influence, where things will feel quite unstable. But Saturn is coming back to say, well, what do you need to stabilize that allows you to feel more stable with this Uranus in the fourth. And what you need to stabilize, Pisces, sun, moon, and ascendant, will be coming from you. So there's something in you that requires stabilizing. Is that your faith? Is that something that you need to do with more discipline? Is that something that you need to do in a way that allows you to feel a better, solid structure of yourself that might include better boundaries with other people? Now, since January of 2025, the North Node has been going through your first house, through Pisces. And so there is a very strong emphasis on the self and how the self needs to grow. New ways of showing up, a new way of being that is going to have an impact on the rest of your life in all other domains of your life. So this is ongoing, but especially strong now that Saturn is back and with a Jupiter that is really offering major support, coming not only trinal to you, your ruler, but also from a place of exaltation. So this is an opportunity for realizing good luck, abundance, sense of positivity, a sense of more love, better dynamic around, around what you are hoping to create, hoping to express. Mars is in the 8th house of what you receive from other people. So there may be an obstacle there that might be something to do with financial struggles or financial disagreements or things that haven't been quite worked out yet. Compromise is necessary when Mars is in Libra. And certainly taking action is necessary. But you've got Neptune ruled by this Mars in the 2nd house of money, so you may not even be clear what you need to take action on. So that might be something that you need to wait for. But Venus is ruling the 8th house from the 6th house. So where Venus is in the 6th house, there's cooperation with people who are considered like peers or like people that you work with or who work for you, your support network in terms of your professional employees. Pardon me. And Mercury has had you go with a fine-tooth comb over your house of the 6th house of your everyday health, habits, how you work, the way that you deal with work. And that is since July. So July and August, Mercury was going back and forth through the 6th. Now Venus is in there. And when she first moved in there on the 25th of August, she immediately opposed Pluto. Listen to the introduction if you haven't already. So there's something of the dynamic of how you want to be, how you would like things to pan out, how you would hope that things can be, but a recognition with the Pluto in the 12th, especially retrograding now, of how you're messing it up or how you're sabotaging yourself or how you're how you recognize you need to make some kind of change coming from either what is your unconscious nature or things that you're doing behind the scenes that aren't helpful, or coming from a realization of a more spiritual, elevated, so-called elevated way of living your life that will bring you the thing that you're really hoping to find with that North Node in your first house. So there's something to clear out is what I'm trying to get at here. There's something to clear out that will enhance the everyday. And it's really, it encompasses the last few days of August. So by the time Saturn has moved back into your first house, that understanding is clear. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of the last week of August, till about the 28th, that's very powerful. So take that message to heart and recognize then what the significance of that is, so that when Saturn moves back into your first house, you're on it and you're saying, okay, this is it, time to get serious. If this is what I want to accomplish, this is how I need to show up, and no more shenanigans, no more of that. For example, this may have something to do with hidden enemies or people, particularly women in the case of Venus, um, who are not working in your best interest, and maybe you're realizing something about that. Pluto is giving you insight, particularly supported by the trine that it's getting from Uranus in the fourth, where you can also have psychological insights. You can have some ways of seeing things in a completely different way that shakes you up psychologically, that opens you up psychologically to recognizing patterns where perhaps before you tolerated things that you shouldn't, and now you realize, okay, no more of that. This is what I need. This is what keeps me happy and what I desire in terms of what my everyday life feels like. And this can reflect on your career because, again, the Jupiter in the fifth, which is bringing out that creative expression, but also great good fortune, is ruling your 10th house. So part of your dynamic around your creative expression, your creative output, um, even the things that just bring you joy and bring you happiness can also show up in your 10th house. It can also be literally about children, that your children or a pregnancy, Jupiter represents parents and pregnancy and babies, that some aspect of this is being seen, and you're becoming more aware of it at this time or people are becoming aware of you around this topic in the 10th house way, that people see you, or you're now wanting to be seen in a new way. Yeah, the one pesky thing here is that Mars in the 8th, Mars will, by the third week of September, move into the 9th, and that will help a lot. And also the fact that Mercury is moving into your 7th, just a couple of days. In fact, I think it's the 3rd of September after Saturn moves into your first, Mercury goes into your 7th house and gains a lot of dignity, not only because it's exalted and in domicile, but it's in a 7th house quadrant house. So it means that you're gaining in so many ways by that Mercury immediately as it enters into Virgo, and that's going to support all of the topics that Virgo represents for you that are highlighted since the Virgo new moon, that has been that is the theme of this whole lunation cycle of 28 days, 29 days, until the 21st of September. So especially if you are a Virgo, if you are Pisces with, say, a Virgo sun or a Virgo moon, or if you are, working from the opposite end of the spectrum and your relationships are being affected in this way, it's going to bring you immense benefit. So from the Pisces sun, moon, and ascendant sign, especially from the ascendant. I think that's it, Pisces. So that pesky Mars is going to sort itself out. So it's really about taking action on the things that are irking you from behind the scenes, or things that need to be dealt with in a way that you slowly are gaining confidence in yourself to deal with. So it's a very temporary situation, but it will be very impactful to stay aware of any instability emotionally, psychologically, or otherwise that can be healed, let's say, by having a stronger sense of faith in yourself and just faith, full stop. All right, good luck with all of this. Thanks for listening to this point, and I will see you in the next video.